Welcome to F-Bomb Friday. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my husband, Todd. Hey, hun.
Hey, baby.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
Let's hit it. A knock late at night. Not the kind of knock from a friend or the impatient pounding of a delivery driver. Just slow, deliberate taps against a door that shouldn't have visitors at this hour. Outside, children wait. They are dressed strangely, almost out of fashion. Their faces are pale. Their expressions blank. And when they speak, their voices carry unsettling certainty. Most people would say yes, because we're taught to be polite, to help those in need, to trust what looks harmless. But something deep inside screams, do not open the door. Maybe it's the way they never quite blink, or the way they avoid the light. Maybe it's their eyes that are completely black. No whites, no pupils, no iris, just darkness. For nearly 3 decades, stories like this have spread across North America. Reports from lonely highways, suburban neighborhoods, gas stations, apartment complexes, and quiet rural roads. Witnesses from every walk of life tell remarkably similar stories. Children appearing out of nowhere, requesting help, demanding entry, and leaving behind a feeling of terror unlike anything they've ever experienced. And while many dismiss these accounts as urban legend, internet folklore, or mass hysteria, these stories refuse to disappear, because every so often someone new comes forward, someone who swears they saw them, someone who insists those eyes were real. And here in Michigan, a state already rich with haunted roads, forgotten forests, strange disappearances, and unexplained encounters, reports of these mysterious children have found fertile ground. On today's episode, we're opening the file. We will examine where the legend began. These encounters are reported across Michigan. Witnesses who still stand by their stories, and the theories, both ordinary and extraordinary, that attempt to explain one of the most disturbing modern legends ever told. So lock those doors. And if you hear a knock late tonight, you might want to think twice before answering. On today's episode of F-Bomb, we're talking about the black-eyed children. Now imagine it's late. Not 10 p.m. late or midnight late. It's the kind of late where the world feels abandoned. The kind of hour when the roads are quiet, when the glow of your television becomes the only light in your house. Maybe you're scrolling through your phone, watching some terrible movie you've seen 100 times before. Or maybe you're just sitting at the kitchen table nursing a cup of coffee because sleep just isn't happening tonight. Outside, the neighborhood is silent. There's no traffic or dogs barking. No voices, just the darkness. Then, a sharp rap against the front door. You glance at the clock. It's 2:17 a.m. Your stomach tightens immediately. Nobody visits at 2:17 in the morning. Nobody good, anyway. So you wait. You imagine. Maybe it was the house settling, or maybe it was louder this time, deliberate, patient, not frantic or desperate, just waiting for you to get up. So you walk toward the door. Every instinct is telling you not to, but curiosity is a powerful thing. So you peek through the window, and there they are. 2 children standing on your porch, dressed strangely, not really old-fashioned or modern either. Somehow it's just wrong. It's almost like someone trying to imitate what children should look like. A boy and a girl, maybe 8, maybe 14. It's hard to tell. Witnesses often say the same thing, that the children seem to exist in that strange space between childhood and adolescence. Old enough to speak confidently, but young enough to trigger your protective instincts. The perfect age. The age where you naturally want to help. They're standing quietly, hands at their side, not moving or fidgeting, not really acting like children. And that's the first thing that feels wrong. Real kids move and look around. Real kids get cold, even nervous. These children don't. They simply just stand there, waiting and watching, as though they already know you're looking at them. Then one of them speaks, not loudly or aggressive, but polite, almost too polite. So you hesitate. The request isn't unreasonable. Maybe they're lost. Maybe their parents are nearby. Maybe something happened. But before you can answer, the unease deepens, because suddenly you realize something strange. The children aren't explaining anything. They're not telling you where they came from, or asking to use the phone, or asking for directions. They're not asking for help. They're asking for permission. Specifically, permission to enter. Please. The voice remains calm and controlled, almost rehearsed. We need to come inside. Every witness account contains some version of this moment. The request, the insistence, the need for permission again and again and again. Now, these children don't force doors open. They don't break windows or threaten. They ask over and over again, until the person on the other side begins to question their own instincts. Because fear doesn't arrive immediately, not usually. Most witnesses describe something different, like confusion, discomfort, anxiety, a weird feeling they just can't explain. Kind of like standing on the edge of a cliff in total darkness. Like hearing footsteps behind you when nobody should be there. Like realizing you've forgotten something important but not knowing what. That feeling just continues to grow, slowly and relentlessly. And then the children look up. That's when you notice their eyes. Not dark, not brown, not eyes hidden in a shadow, but black, and entirely black. No whites, no iris, no pupils, nothing. Just impossible pools of darkness staring back through the glass. And then your instincts kick. Run. Lock the door. Do not let them inside. That reaction is pretty universal. People describe overwhelming terror and panic and dread, primal fear beyond logic. They say it feels less like seeing something frightening and more like realizing something terrifying had been standing in front of them all along. One witness described it as looking into the eyes of something that hated humanity. Not personally or emotionally, just fundamentally. And yet the children never stop asking, "Please, let us in." They remain calm, polite, patient, as though refusal isn't really an option, as though eventually you will agree, as though they already know how this story ends. Now, Michigan folklore is crowded with creatures and spirits, but the black-eyed children are different because they don't belong to any one location. They don't hunt a single bridge or lurk in a single forest. They don't stay where they're supposed to. Instead, they appear wherever people are vulnerable. A rest stop, a gas station, a lonely farmhouse, an apartment complex, a dark road, suburban neighborhood. Anywhere a person might find themselves unexpectedly alone. And Michigan offers plenty of those places. Let's imagine you're driving alone on one of Michigan's long, isolated roads. It's November. Sky is overcast. Cold rain taps against your windshield. The nearest town is 20 miles behind you, and the next town is 30 miles ahead. Your headlights carve a narrow tunnel through the endless darkness. Then you notice someone, standing beside the road. It's a child, and they're alone, in the middle of nowhere. Would you stop? Most people say yes. At least at first, because that's the genius of the legend. The black-eyed children exploit something deeply human: compassion, empathy, the instinct to protect, the belief that children need help. And every witness report seems to begin with that same terrible mistake: the decision to engage, the decision to roll down the window, to answer the knock at the door, to look. But once you look, you see the eyes. And once you see those, nothing feels normal anymore. For decades, people have argued over what these entities might be: vampires, demons, aliens, ghosts, interdimensional travelers, something older, or something entirely unknown. The theories are truly endless. The evidence is frustratingly thin, and yet the stories continue, year after year and state after state. And whether you believe in them or not, the fear they inspire is very real, because the black-eyed children touch something ancient, a warning buried deep inside human instinct, a warning that says, not everything that looks human is human. And if folklore exists for a reason, if legends survive because they carry hidden truths, then perhaps the most chilling question isn't what the black-eyed children are. Perhaps the most chilling question is why so many people who encounter them tell the same story, the same request, the same eyes, the same overwhelming terror, and why almost every witness ends their account with the same warning. A warning delivered with absolute certainty. A warning spoken by people who still seem shaken years later. A warning they never forget. Whatever you do, don't let them in. Every legend has a beginning. At least that's what we'd like to believe. We like our monsters organized, cataloged, neatly labeled. We want to know where they came from, who saw them first, what year, which witness started the story. Because if we can identify a beginning, maybe we can convince ourselves there will be an end. The problem with folklore is that it rarely works that way. Legends don't appear out of nowhere. They evolve and mutate. They borrow pieces from older stories. A little bit of vampire lore here, a little demonic folklore there, an urban legend, campfire tale, nightmares. Then eventually somebody gives the thing a name, and suddenly people think that's where the story began. The black-eyed children are no exception. Most paranormal researchers point to a single encounter, a single witness, a single terrifying night. But as we'll discover, the roots of this story may stretch much deeper than anyone realizes. Now, before Facebook and YouTube, before podcasts, before ghost hunting television shows, back when the internet was still a strange frontier occupied mostly by hobbyists, tech enthusiasts, and people willing to endure this screeching song of dial-up modems, the world was different. Stories spread more slowly. Rumors took time. There were no viral TikToks, Reddit threads, social media algorithms feeding fear into millions of homes overnight. It was a story that managed to spread across the country in 1996. And it did so because people generally found this story compelling or disturbing, or both. Now that year, a journalist named Brian Bethel found himself living through an experience that would change paranormal folklore forever. And if his account is true, he may have encountered the first modern black-eyed children ever documented. It was an evening in Abilene, Texas. Bethel had stopped near a shopping center, nothing unusual there or spooky. Just another ordinary night. The kind of night that disappears into memory almost as soon as it happens. He parked the car, pulled out some paperwork, and focused on the task in front of him. It was quiet. Businesses were closing. Traffic was light. Everything seemed completely normal. Then someone knocked on his window. At first, he assumed it was a beggar, or maybe a teenager looking for help. Nothing alarming or threatening, but when he turned toward the sound, he saw two boys standing beside his vehicle. The older one appeared to be around 13, the younger perhaps 8 or 9. They wore hooded clothing, their faces seemed pale. Their expressions were oddly serious, not frightened or desperate or emotional, just blank. The older of the two immediately began to speak, and according to Bethel, something felt wrong from the very first sentence. Not because of what was said, it was how it was said. It sounded rehearsed, controlled, adult-like, like someone reciting lines from a script. The boys explained they wanted a ride. They needed transportation to their mother's house. They had been trying to see a movie and were now stranded, and they needed help to get home. The request seemed harmless and reasonable. Most people would probably feel sympathetic, concerned, maybe a little suspicious, but nothing more. Yet Bethel later described an overwhelming sense of dread washing over him. Not fear, not yet. Something deeper, something harder to define. A feeling that every instinct in his body was suddenly sounding an alarm. You know that feeling. Everyone does. The moment your subconscious notices something before your conscious mind catches up. The moment you realize a room has gone silent. When you sense someone standing behind you. Feel the hair on the back of your neck rise for reasons you can't explain. That's what he described. The boys kept speaking patiently and politely, explaining why they needed help, repeating their request, trying to persuade him, but all the while that feeling just kept growing stronger. Then something happened. A split-second realization. When Bethel looked closer, he noticed the eyes. Black, completely black. An endless darkness staring back at him from the shadows beneath their hoods. The fear arrived instantly. Not the fear of being robbed or the fear of being attacked. Something stranger. Something primal. That kind of fear people describe after encountering predators in the wild. Something said, "Leave, now." Bethel later wrote that he became convinced allowing those children in his car would be a catastrophic mistake. Not dangerous, catastrophic. That distinction matters because witnesses often struggle to explain exactly what they feared. The children didn't threaten and they didn't display any weapons. They didn't make any violent statements. Yet people act as though they are standing inches away from something profoundly unnatural, something wearing a human face. The boys continued to ask, continued to insist, continued to attempt to gain permission. Finally, Bethel rolled up the window and started the vehicle and left as quickly as he could. When he looked back, those children, they were gone, as though they had never even been there at all. Now, years later, Bethel would say that he remained convinced that something was deeply wrong about those children, not merely unusual or creepy, but wrong. But here's where things become interesting. Once Bethel shared his account online, something unexpected happened. People began responding, like a lot of people. Some claimed similar encounters. Others remembered strange experiences they had dismissed years later. Some described knocking on doors. Others described children appearing at windows. Some encountered them at gas stations, parking lots, roadsides, apartments. The details vary, but certain elements remained remarkably consistent. The eyes, they were polite. They asked for permission. The overwhelming sense of fear. Then suddenly a disturbing question emerged. Had these things existed all along? Someone hears a strange howl in the woods. Years later, they discover dogman legends. A family sees mysterious lights over a lake. Later, they learn about local folklore. A traveler encounters something impossible, then discovers that dozens of people have reported the same thing. But sometimes a legend doesn't create the experience. Sometimes the experience creates the legend. And that's where the black-eyed children become truly fascinating. Because once researchers began examining older folklore, they found some unsettling similarities. Not exact matches, but echoes. Ancient stories of supernatural visitors seeking entry. European vampire legends requiring an invitation. Demonic entities unable to cross thresholds without permission. Fairy folklore involving beings who trick humans into granting access. Repeatedly, the same idea appears. Something arrives, something that looks almost human, something that asks to come inside. Whatever happens afterward is never good. Now, if you're listening from Michigan, this should sound familiar because Michigan folklore is packed with stories involving boundaries. Places you shouldn't go, doors you shouldn't open, invitations you should not accept. The woods have rules, the lakes have rules, the old roads have rules. And perhaps the oldest rule of all is simple. Not every traveler deserves your hospitality. As the black-eyed children legend spread through the 1990s and early 2000s, reports began surfacing from all over North America, including the Great Lakes region. And patterns were emerging because eventually you stop asking whether every story is true and start asking why so many stories sound the same. Same eyes, the same requests, the same terror, and why? Why the same feeling something ancient and predatory is hiding behind a child's face? The deeper people dug into the black-eyed children phenomena, the less human these visitors appeared. Now, for us Michiganders, we know that there is something different about Michigan after dark. People who don't live here sometimes struggle to understand it. We have beautiful shorelines, colorful fall forests, picturesque little towns. But what they don't see is the darkness. Not the city darkness, not the suburban darkness, but real darkness. The kind that swallows entire landscapes that exist between towns. The kind that settles over miles of forest, farmland, and shoreline where the nearest porch light might be 20 minutes away. Michigan is a state built on isolation, especially at night, especially in northern Michigan. The world begins to thin out, streetlights disappear, gas stations become rare, cell phone service fades, roads become narrow, The trees seem to be closer and eventually reach places where the darkness feels almost physical. The Upper Peninsula and the Northern Lower Peninsula have endless back roads connecting tiny communities scattered across the state. Places where folklore flourishes, where strange encounters feel impossible, and whether black-eyed children are real, imagined, supernatural, or something in between. Michigan provides the perfect stage for their legend because unlike many urban legends, black-eyed children don't require haunted houses and they don't need abandoned asylums. They don't depend on cursed cemeteries. They just simply need people. Alone. And Michigan offers plenty of opportunities for that. One of the earliest Michigan-associated accounts circulated quietly through paranormal forums during the early 2000s. The witness claimed to be driving home after a late shift near a rural stretch of road outside a small northern Michigan community. The road was empty. Rain drifted across the windshield. The radio played softly. Nothing unusual. Then the headlights caught movement up ahead. It was a child standing beside the road, alone. The car immediately slowed down because what kind of monster drives past a child standing alone in the middle of nowhere? The figure appeared to be a young girl, perhaps 12 years old, wearing a light-colored jacket, standing perfectly still, not waving or crying or signaling for help, simply waiting. The driver stopped, rolled down the window, and asked if she needed assistance. The girl's response was immediate. "Can you take me home?" Reasonable enough, until the man noticed something strange. She never provided an address, never explained where she came from, or answered any questions directly. Instead, she kept repeating the request. "Can you take me home?" Again and again and again. The driver later claimed a growing sense of panic that made no logical sense. Nothing threatening had happened or overtly frightening, yet every instinct screamed to leave. The girl stepped closer, and then he saw her eyes. Black, the deepest, darkest black. But before she could say another word, he left. The driver never looked back. Is this a true story? A fabrication? Nobody knows. That is the frustrating thing about black-eyed children reports. Evidence is scarce. Verification is nearly impossible. Yet the stories continue, especially around places where people already feel vulnerable, because uncertainty is the fuel that folklore runs on. In another account, a gas station, not one of the giant travel centers along the interstate, but a small one, a lonely one, the kind with 2 pumps and a flickering sign, the kind that feels abandoned after midnight. Anyone who has spent enough time driving in Michigan back roads knows exactly the type of place I'm talking about. The witness in this story claimed to have stopped for fuel sometime after midnight. The parking lot was empty, the store deserted. The attendant was half asleep behind the counter. While pumping gas, the witness noticed 2 boys standing near the edge of the lot, watching but not speaking or moving, only watching. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Kids do strange things. Teenagers hang around places they shouldn't. No big deal. Until the boys started walking toward the vehicle. Slowly, purposefully. The witness later described feeling an immediate spike of anxiety, the same sensation reported by dozens of other alleged encounters. A feeling that arrives before any obvious threat presents itself. As soon as the boys reached the car, "Can we get a ride?" The request was polite, respectful, normal, but something felt wrong. The witness couldn't explain it. Not then, not afterward, just wrong. Then came the eyes. Always the eyes. The witness left without finishing the fuel purchase, and whether the story happened exactly as reported hardly matters, because stories like this spread for a reason. They resonate. They tap into fears that already exist. The fear deeply rooted in Michigan culture. The fear of getting stranded, of being isolated, of becoming lost in places where help may be hours away. Some paranormal researchers have even speculated that reports of black-eyed children clustered near areas already associated with unusual activity. Not proof or evidence, just an observation. But it raises an interesting possibility. What if black-eyed children are not a phenomenon unto themselves? What if they are part of something larger? A symptom rather than a cause, a manifestation appearing wherever human beings encounter the unknown. Because here's something many people overlook. The black-eyed children don't actually do much, at least not in stories. They ask, they wait, they stare. That's it. Most encounters end before anything happens. The witness refuses, the children leave, the story ends. Which means the true horror isn't what the children do, it's what the people imagine they might do. An imagination is often more frightening than reality. Think about that. Nobody knows what happens if you let them in, not really. There are stories, of course, rumors, claims, whispers passed around paranormal communities. People report illnesses, nightmares, bad luck, unexplained deaths, psychological disturbances, but hard evidence? No. Which leaves a terrifying void, a blank space. And the human mind hates blank spaces. We fill them with monsters, demons, vampires, aliens, and with every fear we've ever carried. And that's where the black-eyed children become uniquely powerful as folklore, because they function like a mirror. Ask 10 people what they are. You'll get 10 different answers. A Christian may see demonic entities. A UFO enthusiast may see extraterrestrials. A folklorist may see modern fairy lore. A skeptic may see an evolving urban legend. Everyone projects their fears onto the darkness behind those eyes. And Michigan has always been fertile ground for that kind of storytelling, because this state knows how to keep its secrets. Our forest does. Our lakes do. Our abandoned buildings also hold secrets, as do our lonely roads. Maybe that's why stories of the black-eyed children feel so at home here. Not because Michigan produces more encounters, not because the creatures favor the Great Lakes, but because Michigan understands the language of folklore. We understand what it means to hear a strange story and wonder, what if? What if the witness was telling the truth? What if the thing they saw was real? What if something was standing outside that door, outside the window, beside the road? And what if just this once, the old stories weren't stories at all? Because as strange as the Michigan encounters are, the theories that attempt to explain them are stranger still. Next, we're going to step into the deepest waters of the mystery, the debate that has raged for decades. The question every witness eventually asks, what exactly are the black-eyed children? Vampires? Demons? Aliens? Something older? Something worse? And some of the answers are far more disturbing than the sightings themselves. If you've ever listened to enough folklore, enough ghost stories, enough paranormal investigations, you eventually notice something strange. The monsters change, the details, name changes, but the patterns stay remarkably consistent. A creature in medieval Europe, a spirit in ancient Asia, a demon in the Middle East, a fairy in Ireland, a vampire in Romania. an alien in modern America. Different cultures, different centuries, different explanations, but somehow they all seem to leave the same footprint. Something appears, something not entirely human, something wearing a disguise, something pretending, something that wants access. And that's exactly why the black-eyed children have become such a fascinating mystery. Because depending on who you ask, they fit almost every supernatural category humanity has ever invented. Which leaves us with a question, not whether they're real, but if they are real, what are they? The most popular theory is the vampire. Now, before you picture capes, castles, and fangs, forget Hollywood. Folklore vampires were far stranger, far darker, far more unsettling. The original vampire legends weren't glamorous. They weren't seductive, and they weren't charming. They were predators. And one detail appears again and again throughout centuries of vampire lore. Permission, the invitation, the threshold. Many traditional vampire stories insist that the creature cannot simply enter a home. It must be invited, welcomed, and that rule appears in folklore across Europe. Variations show up in dozens of cultures, and that's where things become interesting. Because black-eyed children often seem obsessed with permission, not help, or food, or shelter. Permission. Can we come inside? May we enter? Please, let us in. Witnesses repeatedly describe the same strange fixation. The children ask, then they insist, then they negotiate, but they don't force entry, almost as if a rule prevents them from doing so. But let's add another layer. Many reports describe unusually pale skin, odd behavior, an inability to blend naturally with human interaction. Some witnesses have been reported seeing the children only after sunset. Again, not proof, but enough similarities to keep the theory alive. But still, there's a problem. Black-eyed children don't drink blood. At least, not in any documented account. No fangs, no attacks, no bodies. Which means if they are vampires, they're unlike any version humanity has ever encountered before. Or perhaps they're something older than the vampire legends themselves. Something from which the vampire myths eventually evolved. And that's where the conversation becomes even darker. Because many paranormal researchers don't think the children are vampires at all. They think they're demons. Now that's a word people throw around far too casually. Historically speaking, demons weren't just monsters, they were deceivers, manipulators, entities that gained power through consent, through invitation, through human participation. Ancient traditions around the world often describe malevolent beings unable to act freely until a person grants access, like a doorway, a welcome, a permission slip. Sound familiar? The similarities are difficult to ignore, especially when witnesses describe the overwhelming fear associated with black-eyed children encounters. Fear beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond circumstance. Many people claim the terror feels imposed, artificial, almost supernatural, as though something is reaching directly into the human nervous system, flipping every alarm switch at once. And if that's true, then perhaps the eyes aren't a threat. Perhaps the eyes are simply the mask. Then again, not everyone believes we're dealing with demons, because the 20th century gave humanity a new mythology. Aliens and extraterrestrials, visitors from somewhere beyond Earth. Surprisingly, black-eyed children share several characteristics with reported alien encounters. The emotional detachment, the strange speech patterns, the awkward attempts to imitate normal human behavior, the unsettling appearance, the sense that something is pretending to be human rather than actually being human. But think about that. If you had never met a human child before, how accurately could you imitate one? What details would you miss? Would you understand sarcasm, human, fear, curiosity? Or would you produce something close enough to pass casual inspection, yet wrong enough to trigger instinctive alarm? Many witnesses describe exactly that sensation. Not looking at children, looking at something pretending to be children. Something wearing childhood like a costume. UFO researchers have long debated whether black-eyed children might represent a variation of alien visitation, a different type of encounter, a different method of interaction. Some even point to similarities between black-eyed children and the infamous Men in Black reports. And no, not the movie, the folklore, the original stories, the mysterious visitors who appeared after UFO sightings, visitors who behaved almost human, who spoke strangely, moved strangely, acted strangely, who seemed to understand human behavior intellectually, but not emotionally, as though they had studied humanity without ever truly becoming a part of it. Does that sound familiar? Then there is the theory that frightens me most, not because it's the most likely, but because it explains everything and nothing. The interdimensional theory. The idea that black-eyed children are not vampires, demons, or aliens. They are something entirely separate, something crossing over from somewhere else, replace adjacent to our reality. Not another planet, another layer, another version of existence operating alongside our own. If that sounds ridiculous, good. It should. And yet folklore around the world is filled with stories that echo the same concept. Fairy realms, spirit worlds, shadow dimensions, the other world, the upside down before Netflix coined the term, places where the rules differ, places where beings exist that look like human but are not, places where visitors occasionally cross into our world, and perhaps most disturbingly, places where humans occasionally cross into theirs. The interdimensional theory attempts to explain something other theories struggle with. Why encounters are so inconsistent. Why no clear motive exists. Why no pattern fully emerges. Why evidence remains elusive. Because maybe we're not dealing with a species. Maybe we're dealing with visitors. Brief intrusions, moments where two realities brush against one another, and sometimes something slips through. But there is one final theory, one that rarely gets discussed, one that'd be more disturbing than all the others combined. What if black-eyed children aren't supernatural at all? What if they're folklore evolving in real time? Most monsters require generations to develop, centuries, sometimes millennia. The black-eyed children appear during the rise of the internet, a new campfire, a digital one, a place where stories travel faster than ever before. Perhaps we are witnessing the birth of a modern myth, a creature specifically designed for contemporary fears. Not fear of wolves, of the wilderness, of strangers, of isolation, fear of opening the door, of trusting appearances, the fear that something wearing a familiar face may not be what it seems. And honestly, that explanation might be the creepiest of them all. Because the other theories, they are easy. Human fear creates monsters that never die. And whether black-eyed children are real entities or living folklore, One thing is certain. The stories refuse to disappear. Year after year, generation after generation, witness after witness. The same eyes, the same request, the same terror. And perhaps that's because the true mystery isn't what the children are. The true mystery is why the stories affect us so deeply. Why do they linger? Why do they haunt? Why people who hear them suddenly find themselves double-checking the front door locked before bed. There is an old saying among folklorists, a good monster never dies. Not because it's real or because it can be proven. A good monster survives because people continue telling its story throughout generations, around campfires and dinner tables, in whispered conversations, on late-night radio shows, through podcasts, across the endless digital campfires of the internet, and by that measure, the black-eyed children may be one of the most successful monsters ever created or discovered, depending on what you believe. Because after all these years, after all the theories, the sightings, the debates, we're still left standing exactly where we started, at the door, listening, waiting, trying to decide whether the thing on the other side belongs there. Maybe someone out there today is hearing the story for the first time. Someone out there is locking their front door, checking their windows, wondering what they'd do if they heard a knock late at night. Maybe someone is hearing that sound outside right now. A knock that comes long after midnight. If you pull back the curtain, if you see a child or children standing there in the darkness, quiet, still, waiting, remember the oldest rule in this entire story. The rule is whispered in every version of this legend. Whatever they are, whatever they want, whatever waits behind those impossible black eyes, don't let them in. Well, you've said it before, hon.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Scary children are the
Yes.
scariest.
Yes, creepy kids are the scariest of all. And now I know why. Because it taps into our basic human instincts. We are geared to protect children. And when children become predators, that's when shit gets weird.
I'm trying to figure out what in the hell are they?
It's a great question. And I'm leaning more toward vampire, demonic type of entities because...
Why do they need permission?
Why do they need permission? Yes, it's like it's something that has to happen. You have to grant them permission. Otherwise, they're harmless, just creepy. But what happens? What happens when you let them in?
Well, I was thinking the same thing, and I'm also thinking there may not be any stories of that because once they come in, that's it.
That's what I'm saying. So we have the stories from the people that obviously have denied their access, but you can't get stories from people that allowed their access because nobody knows what happened to them.
Well, here's a tip for the black-eyed kids. Keep your head down. You might get let in,
Right?
and then you can gobble them up. Or whatever they do.
Yeah, don't show them your eyes.
How about wearing some sunglasses? And why is it always at night?
Why is it always at night? That's another thing that makes me lean toward vampire.
They get damaged by the sun.
Yeah, they can't come out during the day, so
Well, creepy ass story, hun.
thank you.
So do you want to sign us out?
I sure do. You better lock your doors. You better lock your windows. And you might not want to answer the door past midnight.
I'm going to tell you right now, if any little child comes to this door at night, I am not answering it. I'm shutting off the porch light. That's it. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. And we will see you again on Malice Monday.
We will see you on Monday.